next up is Sesil Pir. Sesil Pir serves as an active HR functional thought leader. She's the founder and principal consultant of Sesil Pir Consulting, a boutique management consulting focusing on changing the status quo of work, and the founder of Whirling Chiefs, a global digital collaboration and learning platform, championing humanity into the global workforce. And another fun fact, she has been recently recognized as one of the 40 thinkers under 40 in Europe and 101 employee engagement influencers globally. So Sesil, hi, how are you?
Hi, Benny. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Excited.
Can you see me, hear me? Everything is okay?
Yeah, we see you perfectly. We're going to switch into gallery view. So Sesil, thank you for joining us. It's really a pleasure. So we'll just dive in straight ahead.
My pleasure, Benny. And Lindsay did a great job. So it's hard to come right after her. Let's see how we do.
Well, I have a gut feeling. Yeah, you're going to be just fine, just fine. Okay, we're going to dive just right in. You say, and I read many of your materials, and I really like your approach. But you say a lot that many companies' culture are in fact a lie. And we need some kind of a cultural transformation in the field of work. What makes you say that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for noticing. I did say many companies live a culture of lie. That is true. It's a bit provocative, but what we find in our work and in my real life experience, Benny, is that many organizations misunderstand the concept of culture. So a lot of the organizations think if they can engage in, let's say, a visioning exercise or develop a mission and a statement of values, they have defined their culture. That's at its best, if I can say, a part of strategic thinking process. Unfortunately, those sort of statements or identification of values alone, things that you put up on the wall doesn't really make up to a culture. There's so much more that's sort of under beneath the surface that needs to happen. That's why I said what I said. And again, it's a bit provocative, but yeah.
Well, yeah, no, we're trying to make provocacies because I think this is the way to shake things up, because otherwise, if we'll just be politically correct and just going with the mainstream, we pretty much stay in the same place where we are now, which is not such a nice situation to be in.
Yeah.
But so following on that, so when you look at it, you've worked with a lot of companies and you have like a wide perspective on many subjects that has to do with culture. What do you think it needs to change in that manner? And maybe we can focus both on a general scale, but also related to what's happening now with the COVID crisis.
Yeah, of course, Benny. So for people who don't know me, I think it's important that I explain I've been a practitioner all my life, right? So I've been in the field of human resources and organizational development for about 24 years now. And I am an industrial and organizational psychologist by education. So it helps to have sort of that deep level of understanding in the theories. What I'd say about today's reality, so I think a lot of people know that there's this data out there. Since the year 2000, 52% of Fortune 500 companies have disappeared, and it is a fact. So it's a statistic that's for real, and it's not because these organizations didn't have good ideas, but with the evolution of labor trends and economic targets, Benny, the average life cycle of companies dropped significantly. I think it was in the 60s, we recorded the average life cycle of an organization, a multinational mostly, to be around 75 years. And that number has dropped to 15 now. There are some studies around what it will be in 2030, exactly, but we have no idea. I think it's gonna be probably somewhere like 5. The reality is today's organizations were never really designed to, and designed to evolve, if you will, proactively and sustainably. They were built for this just-in-time discipline and with an efficiency focus. And when you have such a focus, you have practices that are enforced through things like hierarchy, routinization, top-down leadership because you're looking to have results in often short-term gains. So as the context shifts around us, there's become almost a mismatch between the pace of change in the environment and the speed of change which organizations can respond to. So for me, it's really no longer a question of whether continuous change exists in the environment, because I think it's here to stay. The question is whether one is going to try to direct the forces of change like digitalization or globalization, or accept it as an external condition and shift their own status quo, their way of working within the company instead. And this is why we do a lot of transformation work now. I think in the last 4 years, that's been our main focus, both on the business side, but also on the culture side. It's way before COVID, companies have started thinking about this again, because the broader environment is shifting. And now that's even more, it's more relevant, because I think COVID-19 has sort of served as an accelerator for many organizations, if you will.
So the changes that you mentioned is mainly to focus more on the side of changing the culture in order to not make the 15 years survival expectancy that they have now, to keep it as such, to increase it and not just make it slow little in it until it becomes 5 years. So it's more on the cultural side, right?
Yeah, it is on the cultural side, and it's beyond that. I think what we want to enable for organizations is what I refer to as sustainable growth. So a number of things there. I'm a firm believer that our business taxonomy is not large enough to hold our current realities. What I mean by that is sort of multifaceted, but we have to understand all of our vocabulary, all of our theologies, all of our organizational leadership practices were built in the industrial era. And they were built by economists and industrialists. No offense to them. I love economists, I love industrialists, but their major focus is to drive profit. That's the core of their discipline. Now, at the same time, at that time, back in industrial era, there just wasn't enough in the labor market. So that sort of output focus helped organizations grow in sort of a short, quick win sort of a cycle. Today, the market is so different. Market is overly saturated. So the funds flow differently. Customers are better informed. There is direct touch to the product. It's a whole different dynamic. So if organizations want to be successful in this environment, they really have to reinvent themselves. And language is a big part of that, but it's not just culture. It's more than that. It's the business processes. It's the resilience of their people. There's a lot. Again, it's multifaceted in that sense. Yeah.
And that's interesting because, when I read about the things that you talk about, so you talk about a lot of things like, compassion and openness and vulnerability and, taking care of people. And these are not so much, the common words being used in the business world, and they use words more like profits and market share and competition. And people at the work, they talk about compare each other all the time, and these are somehow like a bit of a contrasting things from both sides of the spectrum. Yeah. So how does it actually work? Because it's ingrained in the human nature to be competitive and to be it's something deep inside of us, but still. These are very, very different terminology that you're using. So how do they listen to you even?
There's so much there. There's so much there. The first thing is I would actually challenge that it's in our nature to be competitive. I think we have a misunderstanding around how human beings come about. Lindsay mentioned self-determination theory. That's a really important topic. If people have not sort of read about it or familiarized themselves with it, I highly recommend. So the essence of this is, the essence of the theory is this. It says there are 3 layers to our motivation. One is around self-interest. So it's true that there's a bit of self-interest, but we equally care about having a key purpose and having space to sort of contribute to something that's bigger than us. So again, many research, you know, many of the psychologists have referred to it differently. Sometimes you hear it as like autonomy, purpose, and mastery. There are other ways to cut it, and I think Lindsay did a beautiful job also. But the essence of that theory says it's not just about self-interest. But this point ties back to my earlier point around how our language is not large enough to hold our realities. Because if you think about how we sort of have come to understand productivity, for example, we think of productivity as a measure of efficiency, which is untrue. There are other ways to reach productivity, but people don't know about it. Or how we define growth, which is why I said sustainable growth, because growth has sort of come to be understood as like year-over-year exponential growth. But no matter what angle you look at growth, if you look at the terminology, the etymology of that term, growth is defined as a regenerative process that supports ongoing development, progression of its parts, and transcendence of its individual pieces. So whether for a living organism or for an artifact like city, the concept of growth aims to serve the livelihood of its constituents. And you know, Benny, if you really like look in the history, there's a book called Growth. So another thing that I would recommend people to do, it's a Russian theologist who wrote about it, but it's very scientific. I think it was in the list of Bill Gates reads at some point. So he talks about how nothing in the history, nothing in nature, you know, in the context of business, cities, nature, nothing happens exponentially. Growth happens linearly. So I think the way we have come to understand growth is really driven by ego more than anything else. So for us to expect that businesses are going to grow year over year and exponentially is actually quite naive. It means that we don't understand the concept that we're talking about. And you know, there are many examples of this. But anyway, going back to your original question, you know, whether some of these concepts of compassion, empathy are sort of, you know, contradictory to the business reality, I actually find majority of the business leaders quite care about doing right by their people and their organizations. What I find them sort of struggle with is this state of disintegration. You know, being a leader today is a really hard job because they're within this system. It's a sick system, right? We don't understand the terminologies we're using. Everything is skewed. There are multiple agendas. Change is constant. So you have leaders who are really disintegrated. They can't even be whole in who they are, let alone to do well by their people. And they often find themselves in this place of unresourcefulness. You know, there is imagination that's lacking. And so when they feel out of ideas or resources and they feel like they're cornered, they grow this sense that they're without a choice. The truth is, we always have a choice. We have a choice as to how we show up. We have a choice as to how we relate to others. We have a choice to the way we work. And, you know, if you were me, you know, I travel quite a lot and do work extensively across a number of industries. If I were to sit down over a glass of wine and tell you what happens with food industry, what happens behind the scenes with pharma industry, with agriculture, I swear you would cry because the system is so broken. And again, if you wanted an example, I can give you examples, but there are a number of things that I think is worth challenging in this specific period of time, because I feel like we're at that sort of an inclination point, if you will.
Definitely. Definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. So what will be those things?
What do we do?
Because you know it is a really a challenging time, and there's so much information, and I totally agree with you. The system is in some place, you know, maybe it's not a politically thing to say, but a politically correct things to say, but it is broken. It is based on many bad assumptions that don't really work, especially in these times that, you know, expose so many companies to, you know, your operating model is not really consistent or is adaptive to what's happening outside. So, but what can people do? You know, if they feel disintegrated, they feel powerless, or they feel overwhelmed, what do they need to do? Because for many people, even these terminologies of compassion and helping people, or any of the other things, might be a little bit off track for them, and they would say, "No, I'm busy surviving. What are you talking about? You know, all these nice, beautiful words that you're saying to me. I don't need to hear that now," but they do.
Yeah.
So what can they do practically?
So I will come to the individual piece, but collectively, I think I would love for us to expand in our awareness. And this is why I join events like this. You know, there's nothing in this for me to be here other than being with my colleagues, sharing and learning through their experiences, and to be able to give back to the community. I think we need to understand that we are part of a bigger system. That acknowledgement and understanding is really important for me. Organizations, whether it's a family is an organization, a school, a church, you know, a business, society, these are all forms of organizations. But organizations are still and fundamentally living systems, meaning they're made up of human beings. And so we have to understand that there's capability and capacity limitations that come with that. And if we treat organizations like a machine, we are bound to fail, or either we are going to fail or we are going to exploit the parts of that organization who are the human beings. So we have to somehow expand and discover new realities. This is number one for me. And, you know, tactical examples of this would be like, I don't know, take chocolate for an example, right? Everybody loves chocolate. It's $100 billion business. And the farmer who collects the chocolate beans makes $1 a month. It's
How much? $1 a month?
Yes. So study that and find it out. I've traveled to many of these locations, and the way we produce chocolate kills protected forest and eats up people's sources. By the way, same for avocado. If you like avocado, another thing that we, you know, commonly eat, sucks up all the local water from the farmers. People who have a natural land in their natural geography have to pay and wait for water because some government decides on their behalf that natural sources has to go into avocado making. Everything is corrupt. And then we talk about growth. What growth are we talking about? You know, this is not sustainable in the sense that we are not giving back to the community. So having this sort of awareness and putting people back in the center of the system, understanding that they are not only the heart of the system, but they make up the system, I think is already going to shift a bunch of stuff for us. But if we were going to think about, you know, individually as HR professionals or leaders of organizations, what are we going to do? I strongly suggest that organizations adopt a strategic execution process or a framework, in the sense that what is it that they're trying to do for beyond profit for the world? That what's that key purpose that is going to help them be mindful and purposeful about the choices they're making. And this is not just, you know, proper planning and putting in place a number of products and some targets. This is about really taking an ecosystem view and exercising a bit of foresight with good intention to say, you know, this is who we are. This is why we are here from a differentiated value perspective. This is how we are going to serve. And in the meantime, yes, we are going to make money, but there is something bigger that we are working towards. And I think I really encourage organizations to think hard about who they want to become from a cultural perspective too. And I mean, people are more than happy to connect to me about this subject. It's just not a 3-minute subject, unfortunately. But when
No, it's not.
You know, that's the reality. But when it comes to culture, you have to think about who are you allowing into that living organism you hold? What are the kind of mindsets, emotions, and behaviors you want to drive? So it's about realizing those values day to day that's going to shape your culture. And there are many organizations that do this really well. I think Abby is with us today, but you know, Microsoft is a great example. You know, it's a great example a turnaround. I'm an alumni, so I'm a little bit biased, but an organization that had reached its maturity, started stagnating in portfolio and in numbers, had really good talent starting to flee. At some point, I think it was like 8 years ago, I swear to God, Amazon had a pipeline built into Microsoft. They were like sucking up talent. It's no joke. Then they had a leadership change and Satya came in and he brought in this strong focus of people over profit. And look how they had been able to turn the organization around. I don't think any one of us can argue with that. And there are other organizations. You know, we are currently helping a major pharma company called Takeda. They're in the top 10. You may not know about them because they're in the rare disease, unlike the generative market. But we're helping them rethink their employee experience and what it means to put people at the center, what it means to serve the patient, the provider, the payer, etc. And I mean, it's making a major impact in people's lives, both inside but also outside the company. And I'm really proud. We just need more players like this. We need more people to say, you know what, I actually quite care about the evolution of humanity. And this is a platform for us to find some common values and stand on some common ground. So I'm going to put my stake in the ground and play to that. You know, I think that's what we need, if you ask me.
Okay, sounds excellent. But if I'll return that question to you, you know, what is your company's purpose? You know, if I would live, you know, test it on you on live, you know, not just to talk about it, but you know, and walking the walk and not just talking the talk. So what's your purpose?
So you're asking about my company's purpose.
Yeah, I know, because you're working with companies on building their purposes, you know. So what's your purpose?
So our motto is the change the status quo work, and I love that. It's trademarked to us. We help individuals and organizations really discover and unleash their potential. That's what we do in what we do. And our legacy is sort of designing leadership and organizational practices that put human at center and show a different way of effectiveness for organizations, because there are other ways, people just don't know the methods. So it's about, again, broadening that awareness and putting it in practice.
And your legacy? To finish our conversation?
My personal legacy, my leadership legacy. You know, Benny, you know me a little bit, but you know, I pride myself in creating these spaces of inspiration, safety, joy for people. So it's a lot about belonging. I carry that in my personal life. People who I'm a little bit hard to open to, I will admit to that, because there is a lot of hardship in my personal background. But people who get in, they're there for 30 years. You know, every single one of my clients and my previous bosses were at my wedding. And so I've sort of taken that personal mission of, you know, creating these spaces of belonging to the workplace. And now I'm trying to help organizations create these environments where people can experience something different. So I hope I am walking the talk, but that's definitely the aspiration for me.
Well, it's better that other people will, you know, will testify for you. I can definitely testify from as much as we know, you definitely walk the walk. Definitely walk the walk.
That means a lot. Thank you, Benny.
Yeah. And the only thing I can wish for you, you know, is just like, keep on walking.
Keep on walking all together as a group.
Yeah. Keep on walking together as a group. It's been a pleasure, Sesil, really.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will come back in. You know, I have to go to another meeting. I'll be back again in a little bit, but I hope this is
so
fun.
When you come back, there's a question for you in the Q&A.
Okay.
So I don't want to hold you because you need to go to another meeting, but when you come back, please answer Deborah's question, because it's a really important one for her. So thank you.
45 minutes later, sounds good. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Deborah, 45 minutes.
For now, Benny.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much.